what if I told you that we might as well be dumping all of our recyclables into the landfill? Well, the truth is, that's kind of what we're doing in the United States. Because of recycling contamination, we are sending most of our recyclables to the landfill. This is a serious problem because it's increasing wasteful pollution on our planet and costing taxpayers money. My hope is that by the end of this speech, you will believe that recycling contamination is a serious problem that the United States is facing, and that the best solution is to federally standardize recycling across the United States and to educate the public about contamination and recycling. In this speech, I will explain why the United States is facing a recycling crisis and why I believe that the best solution is to educate the public about contamination and recycling and develop multi-stream recycling. So let's start with the problem. Why is the United States facing a crisis due to recycling and contamination? Well, contamination and recycling is something most of us probably aren't familiar with, but it can take a couple different forms. It can be food or liquid that is on containers that are then put into the recycling. This can grow mold, which is unsafe for recycling workers to be around, and it messes up the process of turning used goods back into new things, especially grease. Grease is extremely hard for plastics to it messes up the process of turning plastics into new items. Additionally, unrecyclable materials often end up in the recycling bin, and this can be for two reasons. First, it can be because a city does not offer recycling for specific items put in bins, or it can be because the item is just not recyclable. So why is this a problem? It is a problem mainly because most of the countries that took the United States recycling stopped doing so in 2018 because the contamination was so bad. This means that there are very few countries that are currently taking our recycling, or we're left to deal with it on our own. Additionally, contamination makes it so that the majority of recyclable loads collected are going to the landfill. This is costing cities and taxpayers more money and increasing waste. So what is the cause of all this contamination? I believe that it is unclear recycling bin labeling, dirty containers, and the difference in acceptable items across the country. 25% of recycling items on average in a recycling bin are not recyclable. This is because the labels on the bins are unclear and on the products as well. Additionally, consumers do not understand that dirty food containers must be cleaned before putting them in the recycling, or they risk contaminating the whole load. Additionally, different municipalities do different things with recycling. So sometimes contamination is merely caused by confusion with consumers putting recycling items into the wrong bins or into bins that cannot take the items to be recycled. So what is the effect of all this contamination? The biggest thing is that most recycled items just end up in the landfill. Only 32% of items recycled in the United States actually end up being recycled. The rest go to the landfill. The loads that contain contamination cannot be recycled. So not only are you throwing away contaminated recycling, you're also throwing away valuable and viable recyclables. This costs citizens more money. For instance, Stamford, Connecticut in 2017 made $95,000 selling their recyclables. The next year, in 2018, when China stopped taking their recyclables, they had to pay $700,000 to dispose of them all. I believe that this shows that this is a significant problem in the United States. Contamination not only means more waste in landfills, which has the effect of toxic chemical release, which can pollute groundwater and desolate more land, but it also costs money because we're losing viable recyclable materials to the ground and paying to do so. So what's the solution to this problem? I believe that the solution is to establish a federal recycling program that standardizes exactly what can be recycled and to educate the public on it more thoroughly. Much like traffic laws across the United States, developing a federal program that standardizes recycling would make it universally clear across all 50 states exactly what can and cannot be recycled. Then this can be developed into community recycling centers like in Germany, which uses multi-stream recycling. Currently in the United States, we use single-stream recycling where everything goes into one bin. It is then more costly and has a higher risk of contamination because the bin must then be sorted to get all the different recyclable materials out of it. In single-stream recycling, consumers sort it themselves. So there is a box for glass, there's a box for cardboard, there's a box for newspaper, and so on. Additionally, we should also educate the public on the problems that contamination causes in recycling, and advertise the new recycling centers and educate the public on how to sort their recycling. So how does this solve the recycling problem? The biggest thing is that a national standard would clarify what can and cannot be recycled, which would eliminate confusion for consumers that causes contamination due to confusion or mistakes. Educating the public would also make them more aware of what they're putting into recycling bins, and establishing sorting by material would help end this confusion. Additionally, it would reduce waste in landfills and save money. In countries where recycling is standardized and sorted by the consumer, contamination is almost a non-issue. This means that recyclables are not going to landfills, and thus landfills have less waste. Additionally, less contamination in recycling means that other countries would once again be interested in buying our recyclables from us, which would make money for taxpayers instead of spending it to go into landfills. So if we adopt this strategy, what would the best case scenario be like, the utopia, so to speak? I believe that it would be more money in communities. The money from selling clean recyclables could be used to fund public works projects like parks and road work. Additionally, taxpayers could pay less for waste management because recyclables are not being hauled to the landfill. Speaking of the landfills, there would be less need for landfills because landfills can be used for longer periods of time because they're handling less waste overall. This would also mean that there'd be less toxic output from landfills due to buried plastics and a cleaner environment for all. So what if we didn't implement the solution? What would the anarchy be, so to speak? Well, landfills would eventually become overrun. Consumers would have to keep paying, taxpayers would have to keep paying more and more for their contaminated recycling to go to the landfill. The very few amount of countries that are currently taking our recycling would cease to do so because they can't process it either. So then taxpayers would have to pay more money to develop recycling centers in the United States to process what we are no longer shipping abroad, or just stop recycling altogether and send it all to the landfill. Obviously then we will have more landfills. They will be overrun, and we'll need more landfills to keep up with the wasted and contaminated recycling. These additional landfills will likely increase pollution, odor, have the potential to poison groundwater, ruin animal habitats, and essentially eating up more of our public land just to store waste. So in conclusion, recycling contamination is a serious problem. Contamination messes up the reclamation process and creates safety issues for recycling workers. And it makes it so that viable recyclables as well as the contaminated recyclables must just go to the landfill. The main causes of this are unclear labeling in both bins and recyclable products, dirty containers, and inconsistent policies. All of this leads to wasted money, wasted recyclables, and landfills that are ultimately have the potential to hurt a community's environment. So how can you, I hope you all now see that contamination is a problem, and that the solution is standardization of recycling across the country and education as to how to sort recyclables in a multi-stream system. So how can you all help with recycling today? I believe that you can start by simply washing your recyclables before placing them in the bin and ensuring that you know exactly what can and cannot be recycled in your area. Additionally, you can continue to advocate for multi-stream recycling and standardization to occur across the country. Thank you very much.